Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today to learn about this interdisciplinary curriculum called Leave Your Sleep for Education. We're very excited to share this with you, and I'd like to introduce our master teachers for this curriculum across the nation. Today we have with us Karen Anderson from Pasadena Unified School District. We have Dr. Jessica Manzone from the University of Southern California. And Dr. Manzone actually led the design and development of this curriculum over a period of over 3 to 4 years. So she's very, very much invested in how this plays out with the teachers. And we also have Lynn Henwood with Flex School in New York and president of New Jersey Association for the Gifted. And she is leading the development on the East Coast for us. So you're in really, really great hands today. And we will let Dr. Manzone lead into the curriculum.
Welcome. We're happy to be working with you for our hour session. And like any good educator, we had a couple of objectives that we wanted for the session. The first thing we really wanted to do in some way, shape, or form was to really look at and define and then be able to unpack and analyze the key elements of an integrated arts curriculum. What are those elements as they stand alone? How do we then merge them with what we have to teach to create this really seamless flow? We're really going to look at how this integrated arts curriculum, how Leave Your Sleep, as well as the offshoots that you might create yourself, provide an opportunity for talent development for all students. And we're looking at it on 2 levels. How are we using this curriculum to sustain interests that students are already coming to us with? And how are we using this curriculum to uncover and nurture and develop new talents that may be fostered as a consequence of this curriculum? And we're really going to talk at great length at looking at the flexibility of integrating sort of the major elements of an arts-based curriculum, theater, music, dance, visual and media arts, as a way to both extend the core content, those things that you have to teach, and as a way into the core content. So it's a bi-directional arrow. And we hope that by the end of this experience, we were able to touch on at least a part of all of these really meaty and substantial objectives.
Hi, everybody. So again, this is an interactive session, so we'd really encourage you to pause the video at certain points if you need to go get some materials in order to engage with us. And this is a perfect example of this. We encourage you to use these next 3 slides with any group of teachers that you're working with to prompt the thinking around arts integration. So if we were together right now, I would say to you, what is arts integration? And I would gather all sorts of information from you to see how you might define or describe this particular phrase. And then from that, we would go into the Kennedy Center definition of arts integration. And what I really like about this definition is that every time I look at it, I gain something new from it. So let's think about it together. Arts integration is an approach to teaching in which students construct and demonstrate understanding through an art form. So students engage in a creative process which connects the art form and another subject area and meets evolving objectives in both. So no arts integrated experience meets 100% of the objectives in the content area or the arts area, but it helps to meet evolving objectives in both, which I think is really important. The other piece that's so important that it's about the process. It's about the pedagogical approach to teaching that inherently includes the arts in order to connect and meet those evolving objectives. So there's a lot to chew on here when you're working with teachers and staff and really thinking about what this means. So as we go to this idea of the National Core Arts Standards, which some of you may have accessed previously and some may not, those of you who are in California, our California state standards are very much in line with the National Core Arts Standards at this point in time. There are these artistic processes that frame the standards. They are very much the same thing as the science and engineering practices in the NGSS, as the competencies of a literate individual in the Common Core standards, as the math practices in the Common Core standards. So they're all part of a larger picture of, from K to 12, what are the practices that we want and processes that we want our students to engage in? And then what does that look like at each grade level? So what's really nice about the National Core Standards is that they separate these processes into 4 areas. Now, every time I show this chart to teachers, they're surprised, and maybe you are as well. They're surprised by the fact that only 1/4 of these art standards are about performing or presenting or producing. So it's not about the final product that's on the stage or on the wall. It's about the process of creation, and it's about the importance of responding and connecting through the arts to our history, to our culture, to our current day, and being able to build that artistic citizenry. So the arts open the door to everything that we do, to current events, to history, to literature, to science, to math. And we're going to give an example today of one way that you can sort of open this door and develop these pathways of learning for our students and really help them to connect.
And one of the interesting things that Karen is saying here is that this idea that the arrow can go both ways, that the arts can absolutely open the door to all of these different pieces that we may be looking at: science, literature, history, math, English language arts, it doesn't matter. And that we could also move the other way, that we could take something in science and walk through the door into the arts. So if we look at that door as swinging both ways, that we can move from the arts into the core content, and we can also move from the core content into the arts, it just changes the pedagogy. Like Karen said when she presented that definition of arts integration, it is a curricular approach. So it's not only focused on the content or what we have to teach, it's focused on the how we teach it. It's focused on the methodology, the structure of how we teach it, and moving and altering that structure to go from the arts to the core, or from the core to the arts, and altering it and varying it in our practice really creates the richness of experience.
Thanks, Jessica. And what I want to add to that is, so it's not just about, I did a report on the ecosystem and I drew an animal from that ecosystem, right? Because that's not necessarily meeting evolving objectives. All that's doing is just transferring from one to the other. So it would be more about, let's look at this whole ecosystem. Let's look how people over time and artists over time have expressed their understanding of various ecosystems and the impact on that ecosystem. And in the meantime, let's look at line. How do we see line in the rainforest, and how might I express line through movement, through theatrical expression, or through the visual art?
So one of the things that was one of our major objectives for our kind of chat today was looking at clearly defining what are the elements of an arts integrated curriculum that you can take back with you from wherever you're watching this to whatever curriculum you are executing. And this is really getting at the idea of conducting a sort of a mini gap analysis, where you're taking your curriculum, you're really taking stock of what it is that you have to teach, what it is that you already do and do exceptionally well, what it is that you like, and you're looking to find those gaps. Do you see in the curriculum that you currently teach opportunities for conceptual connections? If the answer is yes, then that's wonderful. You can build that out using the arts. If the answer is no, then this might be a little place where you put a star for an opportunity to build out your curriculum. A lot of times we get caught with curriculum modification that it means an entire rewrite of something. Oh my gosh, I have to throw out everything that I've always taught and teach well and rewrite everything. That's not what curriculum modification is. It's about conducting a gap analysis to see what it is that you currently have, what it is that you want to have, and where might some opportunities for growth be, and plugging those holes or building out those areas of growth with modifications that are strategic and purposeful. And in our case, what we're showing you today, are those places for modification, those places for real opportunity and build out are in these 5 areas: conceptual connections, current events, creativity, talent development, and social and emotional learning. And so what you're looking at on the left-hand side are those 5 large elements. And then on the right-hand side of this chart, you're really looking at a few. And we want to be clear that we're saying this is not an exhaustive list by any means, any way, shape, or form. These are just a few of the ways that those curriculum elements, those points for modification, can be exemplified. So for example, if we're talking about current events and you're looking at your curriculum as it currently stands, and it doesn't really have any opportunity to bring something in that's a current event. And we'll talk a little bit later about what a current event is and how you can use it. But these are opportunities to bring in something that's culturally relevant to the students that you're executing the curriculum with. Bringing in issues of social justice over time, really looking at perspective taking, which can cross-pollinate social emotional learning as we're talking about the development of empathy. So these are not meant to be exhaustive onto themselves or exist only onto themselves. These elements are meant to be interactive and engage with each other.
I want to emphasize, Jessica, also this concept of social emotional learning. Those of us who have worked in the arts for many, many years, it's like, duh, of course, when you engage in the arts, you're engaging in social emotional learning. But this has been like a big wake up. I don't know about all of your states, but in a lot of places and conversations that I've had, people are actually finally starting to realize that if we don't have arts programs in our schools and integrated arts experiences in our classrooms, then we're robbing children of a whole piece of their whole child development, because this is where these connections come so readily and where they feel safe and where they find their themselves. So it's really exciting to see departments of mental health, departments of child welfare and safety starting to glom onto this idea of, maybe the arts are actually something that would help with this for our foster youth, for our homeless youth, for our socioeconomically disadvantaged children. Maybe they need more of this, not less of this. Maybe the arts actually are the intervention as opposed to some other form of intervention. So we want to just highlight that and how this this particular model can help to connect students on an emotional level.
Right, thanks, Karen. And so now what we're going to show you is an actual example of how we've taken some of these elements. And that's where you're really going to have to be judicious. And when you're making your own curriculum modifications and when you're going back with your own districts and your own curriculum planning teams and you're saying, oh, I kind of want to replicate a little piece of this. That's what we're asking you to do. Is we can't take all of it and dump it into our lesson in any way, shape, or form. We have to be strategic. Just like when you're creating a good recipe, we don't take all of the spices and dump them into our pot and attempt to serve it. We need to be more judicious. We need to think about who is our audience? What are we trying to make? What do we want to serve? What are their tastes? And we pick and choose, and then we season to taste. So we're going to show you an example of a lesson that you can do, and that is built off of Leave Your Sleep, taking components from that, and Anne will explain later how you can get access to all of those materials, but you'll see how we've actually embedded it. And you'll notice that we were not able to take every single one of these elements and put them in this example. But you can see how we've started to pick and choose. And as you're watching this with colleagues, you in your head could go, oh my gosh, they could have added this. Yes, absolutely, feel free to add it. That's how you can expand this and tailor this to the grade level and students that you're working with.
I'll hop in here just a little bit to kind of build on what Jess and Karen have been leading up to. As you find when you work with this curriculum, you really can use this with any poem, any music that a musician has put music to around poetry, or anything that you want to analyze. We chose Natalie Merchant's Leave Your Sleep when we decided to design this curriculum. It already had built in so much depth and complexity, and that's really what drew us to her work. So started out, Natalie created this double CD. She brought in about 130 musicians, and they spent over a year. She wrote the music for the different poems, 18th and 19th century poets primarily. And then she teamed up with Barbara McClintock and created this children's picture book to bring into classrooms or just for children in general. And that's when we kind of grabbed onto this work and we thought, how fun, let's develop some curriculum for it. So then we took it to the final place to bring it into classrooms and created a curriculum book featuring the different poets and lessons. And once you start working through some of these lessons with some of the Leave Your Sleep poems, you'll see really easily how you can transfer this to using the same ideas, but with other poems and poets as well. To give you a little perspective though, because really Natalie Merchant created this and we are building off of the work that she created, we'll let you just listen to a little bit of her, in her own words, behind why she created this.
Leave Your Sleep is an album that I've been researching, writing, and recording, mixing, mastering, and preparing for the past 5 years. It's the most elaborate project I ever could even conceive of. And now it's ready to leave my hands. Oh, he never came back. It's the first studio record that I've made since 2003. And it was very exciting to have the freedom to just work at my own pace and make the record that I envisioned. I've been touring since I was 17 years old. I just decided enough. It was time for me to start a family. Isabel, man in an honest man. Isabel, she didn't care. I felt extremely creative when I had a baby, and the outlet that I chose was to begin writing songs for her. Isabel, now Isabel, she didn't worry, Isabel, didn't scream. But as my daughter grew, and the poetry that I was introducing her to became more and more complex, the project started to shift and became more about the whole childhood. It became more universal. And adapting these poems to music seemed very natural to me at the time.
Thanks, Jessica. So when we get closer to the end of the session, we're going to show you some resources. But this one, to find the curriculum platform, it's a free platform for teachers at leaveyoursleepforeducation.com. And you can also watch the full video of that and a lot of other resources on that platform as well. And now Jessica is going to start taking into one of the lessons that we want to show you today, so that you have something to leave with and use immediately in your classrooms.
Okay, so I'm gonna pass the baton off to Karen very quickly, but I wanted to show you from that original slide that had all of the elements, we wanted to show you our process, kind of modeling that think aloud for how we've started to tailor selecting from the whole and culling exactly what we were gonna use in this particular experience. So you'll see us move from the arts into opportunities for conceptual connections, into absolutely opportunities for creativity, absolutely opportunities for talent development. And you'll see these three and maybe one or two others woven into this entire experience.
All right, at this time, I would like to invite you to pause the video and go get some sort of color, meaning colored pencils, crayons, colored pens, markers, anything you have that would have a variety of colors. Thank you. Now that you've come back and you've brought those colors, what I'd like to invite you to do is to draw a line or a shape or a doodle with each color. So just fill your page so that you can experiment with the different colors a little bit. Okay. And as we prepare for the reading of the poem, we're going to read, and then we're going to think about listening to music and how those things might be different. As we prepare for the reading, it's always good to sort of center. So I like to engage in what I call square breathing with my students. And how this works is you draw a square. So if everyone can bring up their fingers, and let's go ahead and take a breath in at the top of the square for 4 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then out, going down. 1, 2, 3, 4. And big breath in with your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. And out, up to meet the square. 1, 2, 3, 4. It just helps us center. It helps clear our minds a little bit as we engage in the work. So I know the words are in front of you now, but I invite you to close your eyes or really focus just on the page in front of you where you made those different colored doodles, and think about which colors are coming forward as you hear the poem. This is the nursery rhyme of Innocence and Experience by Charles Causley. I had a silver penny and an apricot tree, and I said to the sailor on the white quay, "Sailor, oh sailor, will you bring me if I give you my penny and my apricot tree? A fez from Algeria, an Arab drum to beat, a little gilt sword, and a parakeet?" And he smiled and he kissed me, as strong as death. And I saw his red tongue and I felt his sweet breath. "You may keep your penny and your apricot tree, and I'll bring you presents back from sea." Oh, the ship dipped down on the rim of the sky, and I waited while 3 long summers went by. Then, one still morning on the white quay, I saw a great ship come in from sea. Slowly she came across the bay, for her flashing rigging was shot away. All around her wake the seabirds cried and flew in and out of the hole in her side. Slowly she came in the path of the sun, and I heard the sound of a distant gun. And a stranger came running up to me from the deck of the ship. And he said he, "Oh, are you the boy who would wait on the quay with the silver penny and the apricot tree? I've a plum-colored fez and a drum for thee, and a sword and a parakeet from over the sea." Where is the sailor with bold red hair? And what is that volley on the bright air? Oh, where are the other girls and boys? And why have you brought me children's toys? Okay. As you come out of the listening, I'm sure that for different people, different colors have emerged. Jess, can we go to the next slide, please? Sorry, maybe you already did and I was in the wrong place. Actually, go back one. Actually, no, this is where we are. Yeah, right here. Perfect. Thank you. So which emotions came forward? Which colors were coming forward as you were listening to the words? And how did it make you feel? So this is a really interesting way of looking at color. Color theory has shown us that people respond emotionally with different colors. And what we really like about this particular wheel and way of looking is that the intensity of the emotion deepens as you go into the center. So some of you might have seen some red at portions. Some of you might have seen some blue in portions. Some might have seen some yellow in portions. And some of you might have been experiencing emotions that were actually opposite to what this chart indicates. And you are actually seeing the inverse of the colors, which is also very interesting in terms of how our brains work. So when I do this activity with students, I literally cut out pieces of colored construction paper and I have them lift up different colors as different emotions are coming and what they're seeing. And then we define how different colors bring up different emotions. So go ahead and move forward. So at this point, what we would do is now we would listen to the music that has the same words as the poem that I just read, and we might have a completely different emotional response because of the instruments that are used in the music, because of the genre of music, because of the emphasis that Natalie Merchant might have made on certain elements that were different than the way that I interpreted it, which is really kind of an interesting discussion to have with 8-year-olds. Why would I read it one way and Natalie Merchant read it another way? So they can really get a concrete idea of which colors are coming forward and how that is different for them as they move forward. So what we would like you to invite you to do is to pause the video now and go ahead and listen to the song Nursery Rhyme for Innocence and Experience, whether you get it on Apple Music or Spotify or Pandora, whatever you use, if you could look that up and listen to it and engage again at your same piece of paper. Perhaps you actually are wanting to grab different colors of crayons or markers or colored pencils or even watercolors. Maybe some of you were advanced learners and got watercolors or oil pastels, and see what comes forward for you in terms of the color. Also, I think it's important to think about the specific instruments that you hear in the music and how the tone of those instruments might bring out specific colors for you. So we'll let you pause and go ahead and do that. And we're back. So thank you for engaging in that if you did. So this is Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions, which is a way to explore social emotional learning by assigning language to layers of emotion. Now, am I going to put this particular exact chart up in front of my class of 2nd or 3rd graders? Absolutely not. But I might create the big flower with construction paper and start to come to consensus as a class. What were some of the emotions that are yellow? And they might say happy. We could say, that's great. What other words do we describe to say happy, right? So we start to build our emotional language. I don't know about all of you, but when I ask students how they feel from ages K through 12, I usually get 3 words: happy, mad, and sad, right? So I would like to expand that emotional language and that range of emotional language. And this right away gives us 8 ways of looking, okay? So I'd like you to ponder, how might this exploration of poetry and music help build understanding of our emotions? And it doesn't have to be just these poems. It doesn't have to be just this music. It could be any music, and actually divergent types of music help kids to listen in different ways. And how might the exploration of emotion build understanding of anything that we're looking at? So we can move forward. And so there's your little listening and theater and music connection with emotion with this particular curriculum.
And I think what Karen's done is beautifully exemplify how we talked about the swinging door at the beginning of this, and how we're swinging the door from the arts now into the core content. And that last question is so poignant. How might the exploration of emotion through any music, through any poem, as Karen just said, build an understanding of, and then that ... is where the ball is now passed to, how do we connect it into our core content? Now we're walking into the door, because I know, and we know that some of you, although, we can't see any of you, you're in your own homes, but we can see your faces kind of go, oh, okay, but Jess or Karen or Ann or Lynn, I teach 5th grade science, right? Like, I'm on board with everything you're doing. I'm really attached to this. I feel the social emotional connection. I see the importance of that. But I also have my principal saying, but we need to teach the core, and we have our this and our that. Absolutely. We understand. And we're with you. And that's where we're not making it an or. That we said from the beginning, it is an and. That it's not I'm going to use the arts and I'm going to engage in this social emotional piece, or I'm going to teach my core science lesson. Because if we put something as a forced choice, we all know what we have to divert to, right? So we make it an and, that I'm going to do this and couple it, that I'm going to do both things, and I'm going to use that pedagogy and I'm going to build it strategically so that one flows directly into the other and it's a seamless experience for kids. And that idea of an experience moves it from an interesting activity to an experience that is connected, an experience that is linked with something. Go ahead, Karen.
I just love that it just came to my mind to use this with a current event, to use Plutchik's wheel. So we've watched a video, some sort of thing that's happening right now, and what colors are coming forward for kids. It would be really interesting to explore these combinations of sadness and grief and annoyance and anger and interest and, apprehension coming forward through some of the current events. And also with the idea of science, of phenomena in science. In the NGSS, we're always talking about engaging with phenomena at the beginning of a lesson. So how interesting would it be to say what colors come forward in that?
Exactly, Karen. And I think that's the level of playfulness. And we are going to use that word with intent, that we have to be playful with our content. We have to be playful with our pedagogy to think, oh my gosh, I could read an excerpt from one of our dystopian novels in our study, and let's do this wheel and get your markers out and let's see what colors come forth at the beginning of the novel, and then again at the middle, and then again at the end. We have to be playful enough, and we have to be brave enough to try these pedagogical approaches. And we don't say that lightly. We really mean it takes courage and it takes bravery to be different and to put yourself out there pedagogically to do something different, but you will get a huge return on your investment, and you will get so many more kids interested and engaged by just tweaking the pedagogical approach. And you'll see here's where we're weaving it into our core content. So we're bringing in this idea of conceptual connections. How might the exploration of emotion that we did through the poem and the music and the color wheel help to prove or disprove this big idea that time affects perspective? And we're going to thread this big idea. Think of it like an umbrella that overarches everything that we're going to talk about for the next 2 weeks. Whether I'm a single subject teacher and that's everything I talk about in science and all of my different topics, or I'm a multiple subjects teacher and that's everything I teach throughout my entire day. For the next 2 weeks, we're going to look at the idea that time does or does not affect perspective. And where might there be cases where it does? Where might there be cases where it doesn't? And we just came up with a couple of examples so that you could see that we're taking our core content is right here. We have not abandoned our core content to do the poem or the music, which are worthy experiences on their own. We've not abandoned our core content. We are integrating the read of the poem, the thinking about emotion, that leading to the big idea that time affects perspective in anything that we might study, how it impacts humans and the environment, trending theories related to the solar system, how time, what did we believe then that's antiquated now? What are new theories that are on the horizon as we learn more about these planets that we have not yet discovered or are just beginning to uncover what's there? We can really integrate this big idea. And you can see this here. The next piece that this allows you to do is, here's what Karen was talking about. Take your core, take that big idea that time affects perspective, and thread it one more layer with current events. So now you've already have this lens of this big idea that time affects perspective. We're asking you now to put a second lens on top of it. And now you're looking through a current event lens. Now you're having an opportunity to bring in social justice, to bring in diverse literature, and to thread those, pull them across this big idea that time affects perspective. So if we do that, now we're not just looking at the impact of humans on the environment, but we're dissecting and we're analyzing the current event of climate change. And we're really looking at this idea that climate change has been happening for a long time. And are people, given their political perspective, inclined to change their point of view or not? And what's coming on the horizon for the future? If we're looking at, if we're teaching history and we're talking about the big idea that time affects perspective, and some students are proving or disproving that using different outcomes of historical events and decisions made by people in power, here's an opportunity to discuss systemic racism. And has that really changed over time? Here is our opportunity where we need to make it meaningful, we need to make it matter, and we need to make it relevant. All things that Bransford, an educational psychologist, said, if we can do those things, then we've really captured the essence of that experience. And so we've started with this arts piece. It has swung open the door to our core content through this large conceptual connection, through the idea of current events and those other pieces, social justice, diverse literature. And now we're gonna swing open the door one more time as we're looking at, in this example, that the arts can lead to individualized pathways of study. And Lynn's gonna talk to you a little bit about how this can open the door for talent development for gifted learners and talent development for all kids.
Thanks, Jess. So this beautiful curriculum that we're talking about, and about how you can view the different disciplines through art and vice versa, really opens the door to reach some students that might not be noticed as much in a typical curriculum. They might not stand out. They may have different backgrounds, or maybe some reading disabilities, or whatever the case may be. This may be the first time that they've been exposed to this type of poetry, music, art, and it may bring something out in them that isn't typically seen, which is a beautiful way to find out where kids have some hidden strengths or abilities that may go unnoticed. So it really does help you identify some interests and strengths that you may not have known, exposes them to a lot of these new, potentially new areas, and it helps you to nurture those talents and bring them out and help move them forward. Could you move to the next slide, please? Sorry. So what can we do as educators to help nurture those talents? One thing we can do is suggest an interest survey in the beginning of the unit, because like we mentioned before, these units have a lot of potential, a lot of different directions they can go. And like Jess had mentioned before, it's like a recipe. There are many, many different ways you can go, and you can't jam all of the lessons or all of the different directions into the same unit. It would just be way too many spices in the recipe. You want to know what does your audience, what does your class, what kind of interest do the students have? Do you have budding artists in there? Some budding writers, musicians, scientists, maybe some actors? An interest survey will help bring that out. And then once you find out where the interests are, you can target your direction that you want to go with the units. And then you can actually have some grouping based on the different interests that you find. Maybe, you know, you have a bunch of kids that you know are really into improv or acting, so you can group them for some activities, and other kids are into maybe the painting element of it or the science element. So there are some different ways that you can use interest surveys for grouping opportunities as well when you start this unit. Can you go to the next slide, please? I think Anne's going to talk a little bit about the interest surveys that I just mentioned.
Just to jump on a little bit of what Lynn was discussing, I want to back up a little bit. And many of you have probably studied under Dr. Sandra Kaplan through USC or through California Association for the Gifted. But a lot of her depth and complexity and the icons you're going to see really come throughout this entire curriculum. And that's what Sandy, Dr. Kaplan, was the lead designer and developer, along with Dr. Manzone. So you're going to see a lot of what they're showing you here in many of the other sessions that you've seen of their work. This piece we developed because we really noticed from the pilot work we did in the schools that this was a beautiful opportunity to start looking at other ways to identify non-traditional ways that aren't coming through on a standardized test. The teachers over and over told us how they were able to identify different talents, interests, and abilities based on what the students decided to do with the work, what areas they wanted to pursue, and how deep they wanted to go into those areas. And so they would create portfolios of their work. And this work has been used anywhere from a week before National Poetry Month, a 6-week unit, to an entire school, integrating it throughout the whole year with a year-end culmination. So really it lends itself to as much or as little that you want to use to integrate. The surveys that we're going to show you, the student questionnaire and teacher questionnaire, these were developed to be post surveys. So like Lynn was discussing how you'll do the pre-interest survey. Then afterward, we really want to start getting the students involved in the direction of their learning and taking ownership of their interests, what they want to learn, what they feel like they've mastered, and to be part of that conversation around the table. So that's where you'll see in the student questionnaire, the students are actually kind of analyzing themselves in their interest, in their abilities, how much effort they put into it, and why or why not. And kind of the areas that they would like to continue developing out during their career as a student. For the teacher, it gives the teacher an opportunity to look at each child individually and to make some notations about what areas the student really took off in, and make notes, the teacher would make notes to themselves of, I really want to help support this. Now, what do I need to do next? Is it going to be a mentor outside of my classroom, or is there some way to keep nurturing and developing this talent that we have noticed in this child? So these are just 2 examples, and these are going to be added to the platform. They're not there yet, but we will be putting them on there, and we'll give you access. If you want PDFs of any of this, you can just email through the contact link on the platform. And that's really all I kind of wanted to say about that, Lynn, just to describe it more.
I think it's fantastic. It's really great to have alternate ways to assess student need. Because like I said, this curriculum taps into a lot of different sides of kids that they don't always get to express in the regular classroom. And sometimes these kids, their learning needs or advanced learning needs or creative learning needs go unnoticed. So this is a beautiful way to do that. And those interest surveys pre and post really help with that. And when I was mentioning about choosing different parts of the unit that you would want to focus on, it's still optimal to choose several different types, because you do have different types of learners. And then once you expose the kids to a lot of the different areas, then you might, recommend that they can choose certain parts based on their response that they're having. And they might not even realize themselves what their interests are until they are exposed to the various parts of the unit. So, at that point, giving them choices, and then giving them, even within the area that they choose, maybe even more open-ended activities, so they can kind of take it whatever direction that they're feeling that they want to take it in. That's the beauty of this, that there's no one particular end product that the teacher's looking for. It really is coming from their own reaction and response to this beautiful art. So there are a few things you can do as well. You can have a culminating activity at the end of the unit, and then the kids will choose one thing from the unit that they really want to show mastery of the theme or the goals through a certain thing. So for example, they may be wanting to build, they may be really interested in the way that a ship is built, and they may want to learn more about the engineering that goes into developing a ship. They may want to understand maybe more about the artwork that goes along with the poetry and the songs. And they may start thinking about, how did the artist choose the colors? What colors would I choose? What kind of art or image would I choose to represent that particular song? Or maybe another song or another poem or something that carries through the theme. Maybe if they did go the social justice route, how can I illustrate how I'm feeling about what's happening in the world right now? What colors would I use? What imagery would I use? They can really take it in whatever way they're feeling or whatever touches them. And they can work on it. You can give them a choice. They can work on it in a group with other students who have similar interests, or maybe they really want to work independently on this, and that's a choice that they can have. So every student in the class can have the opportunities to do this culminating activity in whatever way works best with their strengths and interests. And then you may have some students that at that point they've gone as far as they want to go, and that's fine. There may be some other students though in that class that you're noticing are really still fixating on this, whatever it is that they've found an interest in, and they really want to go deeper, and they feel like they just can't get enough. They haven't been filled yet with it, and they want to go further. And that's where you can give them the opportunity to do an independent project. Maybe it can be after school, outside of school, or like Anne was mentioning, provide mentors, or maybe look into some local groups that in the community that foster this type of interest. They can join perhaps a youth social justice group, or young painters or authors. Whatever the case may be, there are a lot of mentors available. And during this time in history, there are some people that have a little bit more time to offer. And with the virtual option as well, it might be a little bit easier to find someone who might want to mentor a child. It can also be used in different techniques that teachers use for curriculum compacting. If a student already understands something in a unit in the classroom and they're able to finish it earlier, they may be able to pull this ongoing activity out, or maybe it's centers in the classroom. There are a lot of different ways that you can take this budding talent and move it forward.
Thanks, Lynn. And I just wanted to add one thing, because I think you're presenting such critical information here that we want to make sure that we say, and we never said from the beginning, so we were a little remiss in this, that you can use this with gifted learners. If you're in a school for identified gifted learners, this is a beautiful thing for them. But you could learn this, you could use this in a school or a district that doesn't formally identify. You could use this with any students that you want, and you could have opportunities, as Lynn was talking about, taking it further, and independent project opportunities, that this doesn't just have to be something for a student who is already identified. This could be for something for any student that wants to take it further, whether they're identified gifted or not. And one of the outcomes that Dr. Kaplan and I were hoping when we started and wrote this curriculum was that it could be used in some way as a means of non-traditional identification, or it could simply be used as a way to foster self-efficacy, self-confidence, and development of a scholar, whether your district formally identifies or not.
Absolutely, Jess, really good point. And it can help identify kids that, as I mentioned before, might go unnoticed in the regular classroom. It may identify English language learners who are connecting to the art and the music and some of the other creative things that might bring about in a child. And it may just, bring about some talents that kids didn't even know they had, and that teachers would want to help them to move further with it. So, and it really having it offered to all children, because you just can't predict who's going to connect with it and what they can do to nurture their own talent.
Lynn, can I hop in for just a second? I think both of you brought up a really excellent point, that when Dr. Kaplan initially started kind of framing the idea of this, it is absolutely not to be used as something where you would pull a few children out of the classroom who would gain access to this. This was designed to go into a classroom with multiple levels of development in different areas in one classroom, that anybody can access this and it has something to offer anyone. And there's extensions either direction. So if you come in at a certain level, you're going to get a read on your students. If you need to slow down and back up and help some people kind of come up to where you are, as well as you're going to get a read on the kids who've already mastered this and they're ready to extend out the other direction. And Jessica might want to say a little bit more about that, because this is something that is really the core center of the philosophy of this curriculum, that it is absolutely gifted education curriculum and pedagogy, and it's for all children.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I mean, the purpose of any of this is for potential to be revealed and for all students to have access. I always call it the "if you build it, they will come" method of gifted identification. So if you're using the appropriate practices in the classroom, then that potential will be revealed. And I do want to underline that again. It's not meant as a pullout for gifted students only. It's meant as a curriculum that's essential for gifted students and appropriate for all. And this is why, because it takes us from the bridge from not knowing to knowing something. So if we think about like a lesson model, we think about there's a portion in which we explore, and a portion in which we practice, we develop, and then we master. And that's how we get from one end of the bridge to the other. Now, sometimes I notice when teachers say, well, I taught it last year, I don't know why they don't know it. Well, that's probably because maybe we explored and we practiced, and then the bridge broke and we fell into the water because we didn't actually develop and master. So Jess, you can keep going. So this is what it looks like. Let's play with something. Okay, now let's work on it. Now let's connect it to other things that we know about. And now let's apply what we learned in our own way. So we just did that. We played with the language of the poem. I did not pre-teach the vocabulary in the poem so that I could ruin it for everybody. We just played with the language of the poem. Okay, some people might want to do a study on the language later. That's great, not necessary for this curriculum. Then we worked on it. We dug in a little bit with the music. Then we connected it to other things in science, in current events, in literature, in math, and through the big idea that time affects perspective. And then we're going to apply it at what we learned in our own way, with our own study, with the things that we're interested in. And now we've actually crossed the bridge and we haven't fallen into the water. So let's look at that next example, Jess. So again, we explore, we practice, we develop, we master. So what does it look like in this curriculum? Just, yeah, keep clicking. I kind of said this before. So it's the poem, it's the connection to the music, it's the development within, interdisciplinarily within the arts, or in history and language arts and science and math and current events. And then it goes into that interest-based study, which really helps us to master. So we don't end up in the San Francisco Bay, but we've actually gone to Marin County. Okay.
So one of the things we wanted to do, and we know we're nearing our time with you, and you know, we know we've just been able to scratch the surface of what this could be, and we're hoping that you were able to walk away with something that either excited you, that you wanted to learn more, and you're welcome to reach out to us, that you're interested in trying or dabbling, or Anne will tell you how you can log on to the Leave Your Sleep website and have access to all of these wonderful materials, something that you just would like to try. And we're hoping to leave you with just a few things, as we've done this for a long time with a lot of classrooms and a lot of teachers. Some of the frequently asked questions that if we were in person, we know some of you are probably having right now. So we just wanted to quickly go over a couple of these, and maybe for sake of time, ladies, I think we really just have time to choose one. So is there one that you really feel like we need? I mean, I think we talked about the identification piece a little bit. We've talked about the unique and not necessarily unique just to gifted. So would it be okay if we take the last one? How long does it take to teach, and how do you organize this? Like, oh my gosh, I've seen you guys do a lot of really interesting things, but I'm looking at my pacing chart and I'm kind of going, where do I put this and what do I do? So Karen, do you want to lead off and then Lynn and I can pick up?
Yeah, I think I would love to, and I want to think about just on question number one. Again, it's essential, it's good for all students, essential for gifted. So this is what I repeat all the time in my district, is that it has all of the elements of appropriately differentiated curriculum for gifted children in terms of voice and choice, in terms of identity, in terms of layering, making connections to big ideas and depth and complexity. And it's good for all students for that revealing of potential. So I always use that phrase. So I want to make sure that phrase got in there. In terms of how long it takes to teach, this, like Anne was saying, you could do a day, you could do a week, you could do a unit, you could do a year. So I think it's important to weave, just like we were talking about with the definition of arts integration. It's evolving objectives. So I think weaving this idea of we interpret things in multiple ways throughout a year, throughout a unit of study is important. I think weaving the idea of music provokes a reaction, the written word provokes a reaction, an emotional reaction, and things that we encounter or that are put upon us, phenomena, evokes an emotional reaction. And how do we articulate that? I think that's important to weave through everything we do. So it's not like we're just going to do it now and be done with it. These are themes that are important throughout. But in terms of the actual lessons and trying to do a lesson with a big idea and connect to a content area, I would say probably at least a week. Probably better to think about what is my content for this unit and how can I weave this through.
Right. I would agree with Karen that you want to have a longevity to the big idea, that you don't really get to see the flexibility of that rubber band if I've only done it for one day, or I've only talked about it this time period or this class module. We really want to see that time affects perspective, and we need to really pull that rubber band long enough to see it affects perspective in that area, in that area, in that area, and in that area. So you can use your own judgment, but if you're opening your unit plan and you're saying, what am I teaching from now for the next couple of weeks or for the next month or a substantial chunk of time, and you weave that in, you don't have to do it. You're not doing it all day, every day, but you're putting it up and you're providing opportunities for students to make connections. You're choosing your moments to do these things. So you're not carving out individual, oh my gosh, I have to teach a lesson on the big idea and I have to teach a lesson on the poem and I have to teach a lesson on, and it becomes overwhelming if you think of all of this as individual activities or lessons. But it becomes much easier when you think about these things as ingredients that you're weaving into an experience that you may have already created. You're just changing pedagogically how you're going about the access to that content.
And even if you wanted to post that big question, how does time affect perspective, in your room somewhere, and just kind of keep remembering and keep pulling back to it through the other subjects. And maybe if you're doing a writing assignment or even like a fictional novel study, that theme could really cut across all of those areas, history, especially social studies. And I'm not even sure that we dug too deeply into the theme of that particular nursery rhyme that we did, but that discussion can be ongoing and can kind of pop up organically throughout the day. And even encouraging it, maybe let parents know that this is a question that we're grappling with in class and see if it can extend over to the dinner table, or, it can be something that different learners can approach from different access points, right? And can make these different levels of connections for that.
And so the children think you're magic because you figured out that everything relates to this big idea. They're like, that's just
aha
like
moment. Yeah, when those kids really get that aha moment, that's it's a beautiful thing, which is why we let them discover it, right? Rather than feeding them the information, just give them opportunities to discover it through this curriculum.
Yeah.
So in wrapping up, I think I just want to point out again the curriculum platform. It's a free online curriculum platform for teachers. Go to leaveyoursleepforeducation.com. You'll have access once you register through, you just have to verify your email. One thing to point out, if you do have security locks on your district email, you might want to go in through a personal email or get in touch with the tech team and say, this is a safe site. Please release our teachers to be able to register on it. Once you're registered on it, you have access to all of the lessons, as well as the full curriculum book, which is about 90 pages. You can download that and print it out so that you have your own curriculum book to take notes on. Anytime you reach out through the contact page, that comes directly to us, and we respond to those emails. So please don't be shy, feel free to reach out. We're trying to build it out and make it more user-friendly for all of you. This just gives you a little tiny sampling. We're hoping to create a few more of these over the next year that we will have posted on the site. Again, leaveyoursleepforeducation.com will get you right to the site. If you're on giftedsupportcenter.com, there is a tab that takes you over to the site as well. But thank you so much. And again, I can't stress enough the amazing talent and experience of the colleagues that are with you today. Dr. Jessica Manzone, Lynn Henwood, and of course, Karen, our lovely arts integrated curriculum specialist, Karen Anderson. Thank you all so much.
And as we leave you, please feel free to access the website. We encourage you to share your success stories as well as ask any questions that you have, and go be playful. Go and, in the words of Sandy Kaplan, go and dabble and go and experience and go and try.
Use our slides.
Yes, yes, please. All of this information is available. You can have access to it. The reference page is there with hyperlinks to additional things. And we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.